Welcome to Where Parents Talk. I'm Lianne Castelino. Our guests today are two moms with 5 children between them. Cynthia Sweeney is a diversity, inclusion, and equity educator, mom of 3, and author. BriAnna Simons is a registered clinical social worker in private practice, a mom of 2, and an author. Cynthia Sweeney and BriAnna Simons, co-authors of The Pink Balloon. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So, Cynthia, you started on this journey in terms of writing this book about 2 years ago. Tell us what made you want to put this down into a book form.
I really wanted to, to bridge a gap between the knowledge that was being introduced in schools to children around gender identity and not having it start at the end of elementary school and lumped into the healthy living component where you're talking about puberty and sexual orientation, because that's not gender identity. And we're born, we're able to express ourselves as children and know our gender identity from as early as 2-3 years old, and not talking about it younger, it really limits the conversation for children. It limits the ability for them to shine as themselves, and it makes them invisible and erases them and creates kind of a level of shame. And so I wanted a story that could be great for families with young children and teachers as well, to be able to use as a tool to create great allies in students, but also give space and representation to gender expansive and trans children.
So, Cynthia, you talk about gender identity as something that children can identify as young as 2 or 3 years old. BriAnna, that actually was your case with your 4-year-old. Take us through how your child told you that they were transgender.
So she was 4 when she told us, but we certainly saw signs earlier than that. We actually started kind of witnessing some, I want to say some indications as early as like 18 months and 2 years old, but at the time we didn't see it as that. We just kind of saw that our child was had preferences for and had experiences that were outside of the gender norm, I want to say, and what a lot of parents of our age and older really wouldn't have had a lot of information about. So we kind of just paid attention to it. We made note of it, but we didn't really do anything specific about it at that time. And then it would have been around the age of 3 that we started having more explicit things said or that she asked us about certain things. So one of them was not wanting to have her hair cut anymore and wanting to grow it out longer. Another was specific to clothing and just appearance and what she had more preference for around clothes. And then it kind of shifted into her experience and our experience when we were out in public with people at the time misgendering her based on kind of where we were at that point. And we kind of later, found that that was actually more in alignment with what her identified gender is. And so we kind of, that, I would say that was the point, and that was at 3 years old. That was the point in which we were like, okay, there's something more here that we're experiencing. And this isn't just kind of a passing or a preference. There's something more here in regards to how she's identifying. And so we just kind of took her lead with that. We would check in with her around, what do you want us to do when people refer to you as a girl? At first it's okay to correct them. And then it shifted quite quickly within a month or 2 of, you don't need to correct them anymore. You can just kind of, go along with it, not say anything. And then it shifted into wanting to kind of have that experience. Like, you can go along with it to the point where you are then calling me that, and calling me your daughter and using she, her pronouns. And then it wasn't until when she was 4, that was when she actually had expressed the language and said to us, I am a girl. So that was when we had that kind of confirmation of all the things that we had seen leading up to that, that was kind of underlying, and that was where she was coming from. And that was the way she expressed it at that point without having the actual words to say it.
It's interesting, BriAnna, in your case, we're talking about your eldest child, and Cynthia, in your case, we're talking about your youngest child, the youngest of 3. Take us through how it happened for you and how it was revealed, as well as what steps you took immediately after this revelation came to light.
Sure, I can remember the weekend explicitly, but I guess the leading up to it was over a period of a few weeks, because the teacher in the school where my child was, in their grade 5 class, started reading a book to the class that featured a transgender character. And it was a piece of the curriculum that they needed to cover, but they could have talked about anything, and they chose to talk about gender identity. And so this book, while that story was being read, it was like this light bulb moment for my child, and they were just absorbing every ounce of the story. And they even said afterwards, they said, I don't even know if anyone else in the class listened to the book, but they would come home from school and at the dinner table, ask me questions like, had you ever wished that you had had a boy? Because they had 2 older sisters, or have 2 older sisters. Or if you had a boy, what would you have called him? And at the time, I didn't put 2 and 2 together that they were trying to tell me that they are a boy. And then it was at the end of the story, they came home off the school bus, and I think they had had a previous conversation with a very good friend of theirs at the time. And their friend said, you need to tell your mom, you need to tell your parents, this is important. And so they came in the door, and I came in the door. I apologize if the light is a little bit funny. We're having a beautiful sunset here in Nova Scotia. They came in the door and they rushed into my office and they said, I need to talk to you, Mom. I need you to believe me. I have to tell you something and you have to listen to me. And I was working and I was like, yeah, okay, sure, tell me. And they said, no, you need to listen. And I looked at them and they had this look in their eye I'd never experienced before, but this fear and they were just terrified. They were so small and so terrified. And they climbed up onto my lap and they said, Mom, I am something called transgender. And I was born in the wrong body. I'm a boy. I'm not a girl, Mom. And you have to believe me. You just have to believe me. And I said, oh, at the time I remember I kind of sat back and I said, so like maybe you're a tomboy, thinking, because they had always sort of express themselves a little bit more masculine, in that they didn't like dresses, they didn't like tights, made their skin burn. They fought me tooth and nail on what they wanted to wear when they were little. But I just thought maybe tomboy, like maybe that's just they're expressing themselves differently. We all express ourselves in different ways. I used to wear my hair super short and choppy, and they got very upset and very distressed when I said that, because in their mind, I wasn't listening fully with my heart. And so they said no, and they repeated themselves. And I said, okay. And they said, what are we going to do? You have to help me. And I said, okay. I said, I love you and leave it with me. Mommy needs to understand this. And I said, but it's going to be okay. Mom loves you and it's going to be okay. All right. So you just have to just give me a little bit of time and we're going to keep talking about this. And so we had the weekend, and I first shared it with my sister, because we had gone, it was my birthday weekend, and she was like, what? And it was like that shock. And I said, yeah, I know. And I'm like, I'm not sure, maybe this book has put some ideas into their head. Like I had some fears that are very common in a lot of parents. It's that, how did I not know this? As a parent, you know, you get all these like books when you're a new parent, and your village is there telling you, oh no, they've got to eat this and don't introduce broccoli first. And you've got to, there's kind of that unwritten manual, but I didn't know anything about this. And anybody I tried to share it with was also kind of shock and awe, like, oh, how do they know? How could they know? And now since I've learned and I can look back and go, well, how did you know that you're cisgender? How did you know that you're a girl or a boy? It's the same way children know their gender identity just as much as any cisgender child. So I told my husband, I called the school, I set up a meeting with the guidance counselor because I just wanted to find out. And in that meeting with the guidance counselor, I shared some of my fears and I said, okay, like I will support them. I will do what it takes, but what if they change their mind? And what if they, what if I, you know, I get on this train and we do okay, like they want, we're going to change names and pronouns, but what if they change their mind? And they sat back and they said to me, what if they do? And I thought, yeah, this isn't about me. This is not about my fears. This is about them. And what if they do? If I don't give them the space, how will they ever really know? How can they ever be true? So it was really great. And I think that's sort of the beginning of our story. And then it all happened really quickly. It all went, once they have that confidence and they can share it, then it's like, okay, well, I want to really cut my hair short, Mama. I want boy clothes. Can we go shopping? And I want to use he, him pronouns. And they were very adamant. He, him pronouns, clothing, all of that. And so as a parent, you're going with it, right? Sometimes you're living in the moment there, and then you're closing your bedroom door and you're kind of experiencing your own feelings. And while that was happening, his sisters were also experiencing this as well. And because as much as we didn't see it as parents, and his dad, like we all really dealt with it differently. I probably got comfortable with it as quick because it's that mama bear in me. You know, we just love our kids and we want them to thrive. But the girls, the older sisters, they both took it very differently and in their own time. And it surprised me how one dealt with it versus the other was the opposite in how they would. And even sharing it with family members, the people I thought would be the least accepting and understanding shocked me. And they just were like, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to know? How can I inform myself? So it's unique, I think, for every family.
You know, there's so many layers to what you just shared there, Cynthia, for everybody involved in a family situation and outside the family as well, around acceptance. BriAnna, you are a clinical social worker by profession. I wonder, what was your reaction when you were, finally told about your child being transgender, and how did you go about accepting it within your family, and where did you go for help and support?
For me, I feel like I was processing it way before, just because I saw some of those indications. I didn't quite know what it was, but then obviously when I was told, like, it all made total sense for me. And it's not the first time I had been, aware of it. So I had also worked with children previous to that were gender expansive. So it's not like it was a complete shock for me, but where did I go was actually, like, for me, I was like, okay, I need to find my community. I need to find people who have similar experiences, because I found value in that. Like, you can certainly read online, you can gather information, but it's those lived experiences that were really important for me. So at the time I was in a more rural area of Nova Scotia. I feel like everywhere that's outside of Halifax, Dartmouth area is rural. And so when I was looking for resources, that's where I found it, was in the city. So for me, I just knew that I'm just going to have to kind of travel there and connect with people, and then see what I can do in more rural areas and just start it myself. So that's actually how Cindy and I met, is at a group for parents of transgender and gender expansive children and youth. And it was in the city. It was
an hour and a half drive about for you?
it was about an hour at the time from where I lived at the time. So it was an hour. And as soon as Cindy and I connected and, you know, we talked a little bit about our story, I had said, I'm a clinical social worker providing work on the South Shore. There isn't anything on the South Shore or in the Valley that's like this, where parents can go or families can connect. So Cindy and I immediately were like, okay, we're going to start it. We're going to start it on the South Shore too. So we did do that. So my reaction was not only, what do I need for myself and what do I need for my child? But it was also, okay, how can I bring this to other people as well? Because I work with a lot of families and I knew that this was something that was going to be a part of my professional experience as well. And so for me, it just kind of happened a little more naturally because I did have some of that base knowledge, but then so family, this is a little bit of a different dynamic too, because we don't have family in Nova Scotia. So all of our family is in Ontario. And so for me, I knew that I had my community and my connections in Nova Scotia, but now I had to share this information with my family in Ontario. And I didn't necessarily know how people were going to respond or react. And the difference too is, and I say this a lot to people that I work with, is it can be harder for people to conceptualize when they don't see your child regularly, right? So for us, we saw the daily changes. We saw after she was able to express herself and live, you know, in a more authentic way of who she is, the huge change in her self-esteem, her confidence, just really blossoming as a person. And so for people that lived in Ontario, all of our family that, you know, maybe see her once a year, see her sometimes on, you know, FaceTime or something, we knew it was going to be harder for them to grasp because they didn't see all the things that kind of happened before. And the way that I shared that was just, I did have some conversations like by phone in advance, but the way that I kind of dispersed it to everybody in a larger sense before we were going to Ontario again was just I wrote a very lengthy email. I crafted an email that had all the information in it as around, you know, this is what we've been experiencing for the last few years, things we've noticed, this is how it's kind of transpired, and how we were told, and what we've done since, and what you're going to experience when you see our child and us next time. And the other thing that I think was really important, and I also talk a lot with families that I work with, is also establishing our boundaries as a family. This is what we hope and expect for in regards to your relationship with our child and us going forward. These are the things we're not going to be accepting of. And I also included a lot of resources and links. I felt like by sharing the information about our experience, but also sharing easy access ways of getting education and information was helpful, because then I knew the information they were getting. I knew that it was valid, it was accurate, instead of just leaving them to kind of explore that on their own and potentially finding things that weren't going to be credible resources around it.
It's a very important point, definitely. Cynthia, you know, I wonder, a lot of parents who might have to deal with this, you know, one of the questions that may enter their minds is, you know, how can this child be sure at whatever age they are? In your case, your child was 10, a girl at birth. And, you know, I don't know if that crossed your mind, but what advice can you provide, given everything that you've gone through in your own lived experience, as well as what you do in your professional life, and it's still on this journey? What can you tell parents about about that particular piece in terms of how can they be sure that their child is sure about their transgender?
Mhm. Well, I think, as parents with young children, firstly, you don't need to be sure. That's not the most important piece. I think you need to be able to listen and respect your child for who they're sharing with you, who they are, because your gender identity is your innermost sense of self. As a man, as a woman, or as lying somewhere in between the gender lines, or as lying outside gender lines altogether. And so it's allowing that space to explore. I think we're always learning about ourselves. We're always growing, even as an adult. And so for children, especially, giving them that space to try on different things. There are phases, sure. Like I went through that Madonna phase with all the bracelets, and that phase is generally defined by about 6 months, maybe 6 to 8 months. But your gender identity is something that, is very inherent of you from your entire life. But how we see ourselves in the world is also directly connected to how the world sees us, because how the world sees us gives us these rules and definitions of how you need to fit. We're always negotiating, okay, well, how am I going to fit? If people perceive me this way, am I going to be able to get this job? Am I going to have a friend? Am I going to be able to get invited to this party? Like we're always negotiating how the world sees us. And so if we narrow those spaces and we judge people for being able to try on different hats and see what they feel good about, then we're really stifling ourselves. We're really not giving ourselves the space to really, truly be who we truly are. We're living our life on other people's expectations and definitions of who we should be.
Cynthia, it's interesting. Your child was impacted greatly by a book that was read to him about a transgender story. You then sat down and put pen to paper to write The Pink Balloon a couple of years ago. Could you tell us what, in broad strokes, first of all, what is the story about, and what do you want readers to leave with?
Sure. I'll kind of do that in the reverse.
I'm going to hold it up so people can see it here too.
Yeah. So that's The Pink Balloon, the hard copy of it. And so I really want The Pink Balloon to be an opportunity for families and children to learn more about gender identity, and that it's not something that can be given to us at birth, that it's something that we need to show the world who we are as we live and we grow and we experience life. And that was really important in writing it, but it's inspired. It has pieces of both of our journeys in it, but this story was inspired by BriAnna's story and her journey. And I thought when she shared it with me, this was the story I wanted to write. This was the story I wanted to get into the world because it's so positive. And for not just parents of gender expansive and trans youth, but for parents of children who are inevitably going to come in contact with children of diverse backgrounds, and allowing them to understand that diversity is good and is worth celebrating. But perhaps I would rather throw it to Bri just to share a little bit about the book itself. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because Cindy and I have actually talked about this before. We were on the radio
last week.
No, but not even with that. Like a year ago, before the book even was fully written and illustrated, because we were talking about gender reveal parties and the reasons why gender reveal parties aren't an accurate depiction or tradition that really should be occurring anymore. And so for me, part of our story is that for our first child, we wanted to celebrate everything about the pregnancy, the experience, and all of that. And again, kind of being in that stage and not having all the knowledge that I have now, we ignorantly and naively took part in having a gender reveal party. And our family is from Ontario. And so we were traveling back to Ontario to celebrate all of this. And that was a part of our baby shower. But the interesting thing is, when we had the balloons in the box, I had one of a different color in the off chance that it wasn't accurate. And but it came from a place of my sister-in-law was told the gender of her child, via ultrasound and all that stuff. And when her child was born, her child was assigned the opposite sex of what she thought she was having. So it came from a different place, but then the meaning behind it has so much more significance now, because, and I have it on video of my brother saying in the background, but maybe a girl. Mm-hmm. And so now that we've had this journey and we've had this experience, it just really smacks you in the face with how much you didn't know and you weren't aware of, even well-meaning. Like, for us, we didn't raise our children with, gendered boxes or limitations based on gender in regards to toys, play, appearance and all that. And so it's not that we were coming from a very traditional place of like, you're a boy and you do this, and you're a girl and you do this. But so that was part of our story. And when Cindy and I got together and were speaking about it, it kind of like just that messaging and that the imagery of it was just so significant in being able to share that story.
So it's in the book, and the story itself is narrated by Briar, the child in the book. It's a unique name for the character in the book, but it's narrated through the child and how when they're born, they're wondering, what did they say and what is that? And no, I think they've mixed me up. I'm not a blue balloon, I'm a pink balloon, and how I'm going to have to show them who I am. It's a beautiful story, and I'm glad that it's inspired by a true story, and I hope it'll be far-reaching.
Cynthia, what could you offer to parents who may find themselves in a similar situation, who may not have the support, who may not be as accepting of this new reality potentially in their lives? What could you offer those parents as potential tips and support as they move along this journey?
Well, it's difficult because there is a lot of misinformation out there. So I would say stay away from Google if you can, and look to organizations that are there to support you. So I'm a part of PFLAG in Halifax, so PFLAG Canada is a national nonprofit. There are great organizations of 519 in Toronto and across Canada. So be careful where you're finding your information, but I think it's understanding that there is nothing wrong with being transgender. And unfortunately, our society has portrayed being trans as a pathology. And we need to move beyond that, because it's not. The WHO only, I think, announced that, it was maybe 2015 that it's not a pathology. It's like, you have red hair, I have brown eyes, I'm cisgender, you're transgender. That's all it is. And so maybe relax your fears and really listen and give your children that space to show you. And maybe they're transgender, but maybe they're just, you have a son that likes sparkles and likes to try on nail polish, or a girl that, like, I'm thinking traditional societal norms. And that's okay. If something is a phase, that they'll grow out of it. But if as a parent, you limit them and say, no, you're not allowed to explore this. You're not allowed to get high top Nikes. Or I think when I was a child, I wasn't allowed to wear jeans because of the traditions back then. It's just it's shaming. It makes you feel bad about yourself. It's confusing for sure, to a child. And, by giving them that space, you're just giving them the ability to be confident, youth and adults with great self-esteem, and know that there's space in the world for them. So
And you
Mhm.
have like a website with all kinds of resources.
Yeah, so I was great about finding information. I'm a bit of a sponge that way. I like investigative journalism. That was my background. I used to actually work in children's television, and the idea of a child being erased or suffering because a parent just doesn't have the right information, it was just something I couldn't sit with comfortably. So I created a website that evolved into what it is today, Simply Good Form. And there is a whole area of resources specifically for parents to help them, from family to schools to healthcare, and gives them information, and also gives them a lot of really great resources and stories from families, from trans people, so that you can actually understand a little bit more about gender identity and see that, you know, transgender is not a bad word, and recognizing that we all have a gender identity, not just trans and gender expensive kids. We all have a gender identity, and it's not something that we should feel like we need to hide. We should celebrate it.
Cynthia Sweeney and BriAnna Simons, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.